the sublime. We generally associate it with nature and the arts. It refers to something awe-inspiring, something so grand and beautiful as to elevate the mind. In the 20th century, the philosopher Jean-Francois Lyotard divided the sublime experience into two main categories, the melancholic and the novatio. The melancholic sublime was a more Enlightenment-era notion of sublimity. It seeks perfect communion with some sort of ultimate power, such as God or nature. However, Lyotard believed that these powers were no longer quite so authoritative in the modern era, and therefore the melancholic sublime could never truly satisfy. It will always leave us longing for something more. The novatio sublime, by contrast, is inherently forward-thinking. It pursues the ineffable, or the infinite possibilities of what comes next. Lyotard associated the melancholic sublime with modernism, and the novatio sublime with postmodernism. Despite this, I've observed in the past 20 years or so a wave of films which turned Lyotard's assessment on its head. These films use postmodern storytelling techniques to generate an experience of the melancholic sublime. In my research, I sought to determine exactly what all of these films had in common and use that to theorize about the driving force behind this trend. I began referring to this category of films as Sublime Satire. So what is Sublime Satire? There are three key elements. First, it depicts some sort of catastrophe. This catastrophe is usually the sort of tragedy that affects entire civilizations, such as war, famine, disease, or natural disasters. Secondly, it depicts this catastrophe in a typical postmodern irreverence. These films are full of cartoonish and outrageous characters. They poke fun at the bourgeois and governments, and they often break the fourth wall by making references to the outside world. Third and finally, these films combine this tragedy and humor in order to create a sense of unspeakable loss in the viewer. How did they do this exactly? Well, I've seen it done many different ways, but we'll talk about one example in particular. My favorite director for discussing Sublime Satire is Wes Anderson, because so many of his films fall into this category. Perhaps the best example in his repertoire at the moment, I would say, is the Grand Budapest Hotel. Although the Grand Budapest Hotel takes place in a fictional alternate reality, it's clearly based on World War II and the Holocaust. That historical background serves as the key catastrophe of the film. Despite this, Anderson fills his film sets with references to the outside world. He mixes and matches various tropes and archetypes from different genres to ultimately create a film full of comedic action and witty dialogue, presented in a snappy, unrelenting pace. In actuality, we as the audience are listening to an elderly man named Zero as he recounts the story of how he inherited the Grand Budapest Hotel. He tells a thrilling and amusing story, complete with theft, assassinations, a jailbreak, romance, and a neat ending where he claims his inheritance and gets the girl. But at the end of all this, Anderson snaps us back to a different reality. The hotel, which was so elegant and vibrant only moments before, is now a tacky and decrepit backdrop. Zero, now a lonely old man, tells us that eventually his best friend died protecting him from the secret police, and his wife died in childbirth. All of the comedy and action that occurred leading up to all of this eventually just serves as a stark contrast for this final memento mori that Anderson leaves us with. The comedy that came before eventually just serves as a stark contrast for this final memento mori that Anderson leaves us with. We can feel everything that Zero has had and lost. But is this really the melancholic sublime? Well, the melancholic sublime reaches for and falls short of some sort of unattainable absolute. In the Grand Budapest, Anderson reaches for basic human kindness. Or more specifically, he points us at a place in history where basic kindness fell miserably short of our expectations. That's what Sublime Satire does. It uses comedy to show us the things that we've lost. So why is this type of story popular? To answer this, I looked at the types of things these stories expressed longing towards. Most of them sought things such as innocence, community, or civility. From that, I drew the conclusion that sublime satire is a result of our disillusionment with the postmodern revolution. Postmodernism marked the death of many unifying, comforting, and galvanizing meta-narratives. Sublime satire is a collective expression of mourning for their loss. Through comedy, sublime satire allows artists and the general public together to explore the greatest hardships of our era through a story that we will want to see again and again.